Chinese President Xi Jinping is in Hong Kong to mark 25 years since Britain returned the city to China. While there, he oversaw the swearing in of Hong Kong's new chief executive, John Lee. During the ceremony, Xi defended Beijing's rule over the city, saying China's one country, two systems model of ruling is here to stay. Xi's words come amid growing international criticism over Chinese efforts to impose stricter rule over Hong Kong. Joining us now with more is Amy Celico. She's a principal at Albright Stonebridge Group, which is part of Denton's Global Advisors, an international advisory group that works with governments and regulatory bodies. Amy, welcome. It's great to have you with us. So, John Lee is a former security official who oversaw the crackdown following the 2019 pro-democracy protests. What is the significance of President Xi visiting Hong Kong now to oversee his inauguration?
Great to be with you. I think what's most significant about his visit was how smooth and successful it was. President Xi last time was in Hong Kong 5 years ago, celebrating the 20th anniversary of Hong Kong's return to mainland Chinese rule. And at that time, he warned that any kind of disruption to the security, the stability, and Chinese sovereignty over Hong Kong would be impermissible. And 5 years later, a national security law has been put in effect that has made it very difficult to countervene anything that the Chinese government wants to ensure the stability of Hong Kong. And John Lee becoming the chief executive, somebody who was responsible for implementing this national security law over the past 2 years, really does mean that Hong Kong is now in a very stable situation under the control of the Chinese government, still, as President Xi says, under a one country, two systems policy. I think the emphasis is on the one country right now.
Amy, after Beijing instituted a wide-ranging national security law in Hong Kong, activists were largely silenced or arrested with the possibility of a life sentence in prison. Does Hong Kong have any recourse in terms of establishing a free and democratic society?
Well, according to the Chinese government, the one country, two systems setup of allowing Hong Kong to have 50 years to go from rule by the British government to complete rule by the Chinese government. We're at the midway point. And so these two systems, as Hong Kong still can have a capitalist system that is a global financial hub, in practice, to respond to your question. In fact, the democratic norms that were very much the common tradition in Hong Kong have been eroded significantly since the implementation of the national security law. The Chinese government says in order to continue stability and stable growth in Hong Kong after some violent protests erupted in 2019. But the ramification is there isn't really an ability to disagree with national government policies or Hong Kong government policies. Today, yesterday, the National Security Council, the State Department, the British government, others have been critical of this erosion of Hong Kong's traditional right to freedom of expression and assembly. Those rights have been undermined, and the U.S. government, the British government, has called on the Chinese government and the Hong Kong government now under John Lee to reintroduce those freedoms. But I think that is unlikely in what we heard from President Xi and John Lee in coming to speak on the anniversary on July 1st.
And Amy, apart from these political freedoms being jeopardized in Hong Kong, Hong Kong has distinguished itself from China as a global finance and trade hub on its own. I wonder whether, the ruling Communist Party in China is worried about losing some of that advantage that Hong Kong currently enjoys in the sort of financial world. What are Beijing's plans for Hong Kong in terms of financial gain?
Well, no specific plans were announced today by President Xi or by John Lee, but President Xi did address that issue. He understands that the world is watching and that Hong Kong and Macau have had this traditional capitalist system in place. He referenced that in his July 1st speech, and he said Hong Kong and Macau should be able to maintain this capitalist system for a long time going forward and a high degree of autonomy, but all Hong Kongers should be required to respect and safeguard the fundamental socialist system of the nation being the People's Republic of China. And so President Xi is trying to respect what the tradition had been, that Hong Kong had a very, very open market. But that openness certainly has been clipped by the political restrictions in Hong Kong over the past 2 years. And I don't foresee that will change.
Amy Celico, thanks so much for your time and insight.
Thank you.